You are the expert in your body. You already know what works for you and what doesn't. So just because somebody is saying this is the new thing, and you know that doesn't feel good for you every time you've attempted that, don't do it. This is your permission to not follow every shiny object, because you know you are the magic bullet that you are looking for in everything else.
All right. Well, it's a real pleasure to have Jenn Trepeck on the show again. Welcome.
Thank you, Zora. I'm so excited. I feel like now we're old friends,
Yeah, I know. When we recorded before and we talked a lot about blood sugar, and that was really cool. And if I'll have that link in that to the show notes. So in case anybody wants to listen to that, we will touch a little bit about on that. But we want to talk about your new book that came out, Uncomplicating Wellness.
Yes,
I
it's
just
here.
amazed. You pumped this book out and
I know.
just I guess your baby book. And I'm excited for you because books are always great because it can condense a lot of information in one space and have a great flow. And Uncomplicating Wellness is so you. It's exactly like what we talked about in our first episode, where it's just like, just keep it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, right?
Exactly.
So tell me then, what inspired you to write this book?
It's so funny because, as you said, this is very me. And a couple of my friends said when they heard the title, if anybody was able to do this, it would be me. And it's inspired not just from, as you said, it happened quickly, but it also was, kind of this year and a lifetime of having these conversations with myself, trying to figure this out, and then with clients and podcast listeners. And all the time, the conversation we ended up having was slow down, back up, keep it simple. We're attempting to do everything, and then in actuality doing nothing, but feeling like we're doing the world and then frustrated that we're not getting the progress. And so this was really also a way to cut through the noise, because even with my friends who are not clients, who will listen to the podcast but also are living in this world, and their Instagram and social media feeds are all full of every influencer and every biohacker and everybody giving them information. And oftentimes they will send me things and go, true? Question mark.
I get that too.
Right. Or what about this? Or just the headline with that sort of confused face. And this was my way of saying to everybody, take a deep breath. We don't actually need more information. We need a new lens through which we can look at everything coming at us and then decide what fits for us and what doesn't, so that we can keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I'm ashamed I didn't read the book yet because I just literally found
Don't worry.
terrible. And I'm going to read it. But I did find out some information about it. And that's what I'm going to really dive into. And you will send it to me because I love everything that you do. So I'm going to guess that I'm going to love this book. And you've really spent a lot of time coaching people. And that's your practical experiences, I think, helping so much guide you with your podcast and the topics to cover, because it's the reality of things. So what do you think is the biggest misconception that keeps women, especially in midlife, stuck and frustrated with their health?
So this is sort of loaded because I don't know that it's just one thing. I think my brain comes down to two things. One is we are trying to do all the same things that we've done before. And all of the things that we've been done before were based on recommendations that aren't really about human biology, but they quote unquote worked at the time. They made the scale go down, or they helped us feel better in some way, look better in that outfit or whatever, because we had that estrogen that is our wiggle room, right? Estrogen is like our headspace that allows us to take some liberties. And so these things, quote unquote, worked in the short term. Now, where we are, we're trying to go back to all of those things and they don't work. And then we're looking at the current recommendations and what's out there. And I think the pros and cons of having more conversation about menopause and perimenopause than ever is increased confusion. And involved in that confusion is all of the male-dominated recommendations and research that, when applied to biologically female bodies, requires nuance. And what's missing so much from headlines and social media and most of what we get is that nuance.
And you, on top of that, the menopause space, there are a lot of predators. Like everyone's
Yes.
trying to sell us something. And I know my audience is really up on it. Like they smell out a skunk in a second. I mean, they're really onto it. I don't want to call them vulnerable or anything like that. I mean, there are
No,
some.
but they will all love. I have a chapter in the book called My Top 5 Tips for Digesting Nutrition News. And so you guys will all love that and resonate with it because it's what many of you are already doing. And then there'll be a couple things in there. It'll take it to the next level.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. I'm excited about that. But we have to also consider so many other things. And on top of it, everyone just trying to sell us something. So how do we weed through that? And like you said, nuance is so important, especially as not only as we're going through this transition and our hormones are going all crazy, but by the time you get to this age, there are people who have high blood pressure. Then there's another one has hypothyroidism. Another has an autoimmune disease. The information that we're getting or the advice or the social media post probably doesn't apply to us because we need nuance, right?
Exactly. And it's so interesting too, because we're experiencing all of these things. And then part of those recommendations is that we're looking at recommendations for each of those things rather than stepping back and saying, what's fundamentally human? And ignoring what we already know about ourselves. And I think that's one of the key themes of this book is that you are the expert in your body. You already know what works for you and what doesn't. So just because somebody is saying this is the new thing, and you know that doesn't feel good for you every time you've attempted that, don't do it. Like, this is your permission to not follow every shiny object because you know, and you are the magic bullet that you are looking for in everything else. And when we listen to all of the other information instead of paying attention to our bodies, I think that's part of how we got here.
I think you're right. In many ways, and a lot of women I meet in our community, they do know, and they'll admit, oh, I know, but they want to find something else, maybe that's easier or that's a shortcut. The biohacking word is very attractive. And I always explain the biohacking pyramid as being that foundation of the things that we know that we have to do, but it's too hard. And it's no fun, or at least people don't.
Right.
And so I think there is a group of people like that who truly just go, okay, yeah, you're right. Let's just get to the basics and let's do the simple things. And even if it's hard, I'll have to do them. But then you have some women I meet who honestly it seems like they are doing everything in the terms of the foundation. Maybe there's that nuance they haven't picked up, or maybe there's something that's missing, and that's what they're looking for. That, ooh, what's it missing? Is this a supplement going to help me with this, or is that cold plunge that's going to help me, or the hormones, or whatever? I think we have both. I don't even know what the statistics are in my community, but I think there's just both, whatever that may be. So, what do you think of the woman who is really doing some of these? All the things, or like she thinks all the things. How are you helping them? Because I'm sure you get clients like that
Yes.
too. Like they really do appear like they're doing the right things. How do you get them to find
Yes.
what they need?
Yes. So first of all, when I'm working with somebody, we're going to lay out that foundation. We're going to look at what's happening every day, which then becomes digging into a lot of the details. And what we generally find is that small tweaks can make a huge difference. And a lot of times when we're doing all of the things, or we feel like we're doing all the things and we're not getting the progress, we're relying on the biohack to undo small, seemingly small choices that we're making every day. And that's not really how they work. So we're not going to experience the benefit of some of these biohacks, or the real benefit of some of the biohacks, if we don't have the foundation in place, which is what I call the biostack. And so when we start to look at that biostack, people see what they're missing. So the biostack is nutrition, right? And again, there's pieces to each of these things, but it's how we're fueling the food, our movement, managing our stress, our sleep, hydration, which is about more than just water, and connection. And inevitably, when we start to dig into those, we see what we're missing. And when we add that in and figure out what that looks like, planning for our most hectic, stressful day versus planning for our ideal day, then we start to make that progress, add the biohack after. And it's like the skies part, you know, sometimes it's those little things. And a lot of times, because we grew up in the eat less, move more, and every fad diet under the sun, a lot of times what we think we're doing with the nutrition is not getting us where we want to be, or it's overemphasizing one thing at the expense of others. And I talk about supplements in the book too. I work with supplements in my practice, but you will not supplement your way out of poor choices every day. And not to say that anybody is making poor choices, but it's the little things that we don't realize are that piece that's holding us back. And so whether you feel like you're at the 101 level or the 501 level, there's insights in here that help you go, oh, wait, that's the thing. And you don't have to read this cover to cover. Like, you can pop around to different chapters because, as we've been saying, you know what you want to focus on. You know if it's the stress, you know if it's the sleep, and you can skip right to that chapter and focus on it.
I find that there's two things actually. One is, like, when you say poor choices, so often that could mean something that's healthy, or quote unquote healthy, or we thought it was healthy or thought it was
Yep.
right. It's just not working for you. And that's why I like this sort of
Exactly.
biohacking space, because it's just a self-experimentation. I don't care if the data says 10 million people had great outcome with this. If you're not having a good outcome, you're an outlier. We got to find something
Exactly.
going on. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is those, you in the book, you break down things into 6 simple steps. So is that the biostack that you just told us, or is there
It
something
is.
else?
Yeah, it's the biostack. And the truth is, I wouldn't call it steps, because this is not a how-to. There are ideas and tools that you can play with in every chapter, but this is not day 1, do this, day 2, do that. It's much more of a shift in how we think about all of these things. And then there are things that we can play with to experiment, as you're saying, because we are N equals 1, studying ourselves and honoring what you already know. So even if everybody on the internet is saying this new food is the greatest thing on the planet, and you try it and you feel gross, don't eat it.
I've met so many people like that. Why are you eating it?
Right?
Because it's healthy. But
Right.
you're not reacting well to it. Your body doesn't want it, right?
Exactly. And we ignore that because we think we're supposed to follow the things that everybody else is telling us, because they must know more than we do. And so the piece that this comes back to is your body is communicating with you. That's part of the dialogue that you're having with your body. And so for us to come back and pay attention to that and go, wait a minute, right? We have this connection to our bodies beyond what anybody else knows. And you also have permission to ignore 99% of what's in the book. Find the one thing that resonates for you.
Yeah.
You know, and if that's coming back to yourself that you already know, unbelievable. That's fantastic.
These is it six stacks that you do? Yeah.
There's six,
Yeah.
6 pieces to the bio stack.
So
Yep,
those six pieces are what I would call the foundation of our bio, at
exactly.
least my definition of biohacking, right? Everybody has their own definition, and it's the things we all know. It's important. And I'm so glad you had the piece about community. And that's something as a gerontologist, we always talk about this and the importance that not
Yes.
many people do talk about this in this biohacking space until actually kind of recently. So it's really cool that you have that. I think it trumps so many things and it's something to focus on. But what I notice, at least within my community, what's the hardest piece, the piece that I see very often that women are not getting or ignoring or just putting to the side is the stress piece, is working on your nervous system regulation, right? It's something even myself, like I can do I'll nutrition, exercise, like I can do all, but when it comes to sitting down, journaling, or taking 15 minutes and listening to music or lying down, it just, who has time for that? I think that's, for at least in my community, is the hardest piece. Which one is the hardest piece that you're seeing with in your community?
It's a toss up between stress and sleep, of which is the hardest.
Of which they kind of go together, right? So
For sure. For sure. And it's funny because part of stress is even having this idea of what stress reduction techniques in air quotes look like, right? So if you're never finding time to sit down and journal, don't make that one of the ones that you expect yourself to do. And sometimes we just need someone to say that.
yeah.
So for me, my workouts were always my stress reduction piece. The interesting thing is that as I've gotten older, as we all get older, depending on the choice of exercise, the body responds to that as a stressor. So it requires finding that new balance in our routine. And I also think balance is sort of a 4-letter word. So, you know, but the idea of shifting in our routine, what that ends up looking like and what we think, quote unquote, counts as stress reduction or counts as exercise. And especially with the stress piece, it can add more stress if, you know, your nutrition plan is adding more stress. It's not the plan for you. And so I think a piece of it too is to recognize how all of the things fit together like a puzzle. And if one is sort of interjecting into the other, it's not going to work in the same way as when those pieces fit together.
Yeah, you're 100% right. You're right. We have to do also, we do the stereotypical stress management is yoga, meditation, breath work. But if you don't like it, I met women who say that stuff stresses me out.
Right.
I can't do that. But there were a million and one ways. And maybe it's just a toxic person in your life you need to manage or cut out or something,
Right.
an actual practice. So this is where the individuality comes in, personalization of
And it
your
might be
program.
that song from your teenage and college years, because by the way, biologically, we all have a connection to the music from that time period in our lives. It might be that one song that like you can just play and scream at the top of your lungs along with every word. And that's your stress reduction.
Yeah.
Amazing. Do it.
I like that. Have you ever heard of these rooms where you throw, I don't know, plates or you break things? What are they called? Stress
Yes.
rooms or
No, it's not destruction rooms, but
something?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I want to go to one. I think it would be so fun.
It sounds like fun. I would like to try it, but there's a fun way to really stress. I mean, it was created for that reason, right?
Exactly. And we also know, going back to the connection piece, connection de-stresses us.
Yeah.
So again, like everything doesn't have to be such a separate effort. Sometimes it's just recognizing that finding the time to meet our friend for an hour is part of that stress reduction. You
Exactly.
know, it is biochemical when we talk about something, we feel better.
Yeah. Exactly. So make sure your friends are de-stressing you, not adding to it.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think part of the sort of keeping things simple theme of the book too is you talk a little bit about progress over progression, perfection. And I think the
Yes.
perfectionists in us, or that all or nothing mentality sometimes brings us down. So what does progress over perfection look like in practice for your clients or readers?
Yeah. Number one, it's recognizing everything we are doing and giving ourselves credit for that. So I actually had this conversation with a client last week, and I think we have this idea that in order to keep going, we have to beat ourselves up or bully ourselves into making quality choices. And the truth is, part of our work, part of our progress is to shift what moves us into action from that being what we don't want to what we do want. And you've already experienced this because you know you feel better waking up when you didn't have that next glass of wine.
Yeah.
And so the next time when you say, no thanks, I'm good because I want to feel great tomorrow morning, that's what we're talking about, right? That's enough to see progress. And especially as we think about the holidays coming up, right? Perfection says, my plan is I am not eating the cookies. I am only drinking water and club soda. And I'm going to leave the party at 10.
That's
Okay,
me,
well,
like the boring one. But
except it's not boring. But then what happens when we get there and then we go, all right, I'm going to have one cookie. Okay, you guys twisted my arm. I'll have one glass of wine. Because the plan was this perfect storm, we feel like we failed rather than saying, wait a minute, I had one cookie instead of four like last year. This is a win.
yeah.
You know, sometimes this time of year, I have clients track or just take notes of everything they don't eat at a party because we will hyper focus on, oh, I ate the thing that I
Oh,
didn't want to eat.
that's such a good idea. Yeah, because honestly, having a cookie and a glass of wine is just being normal. Like in my book, like that's
Right.
what
Right.
most people are doing, at least here in Europe. And nobody's giving credit for that because, like you said, they're set up that I'm not going to eat this or I'm not going to eat that. And I don't know. I wind up being like that, but I never go in saying I'm never going to eat. I'm not going to eat a cookie. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Like I never think
Right.
about that stuff before going to a party or a holiday. But I can see if this is a bad habit or if this is going on and on and on again, and you're beating yourself up. I always tell my clients like, well, just go in there as an experiment. Even if you make
Yep.
that choice, whatever cake thing that you think or extra glass of wine, like just say don't beat yourself. Just say it's an experiment. Let's see what happens and be open.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's not as bad as you think, or you didn't gain that kilo that you thought you were going to gain, or whatever. It's that beating yourself up that just seems to ruin everything.
And by the way, that's added stress, which then turns all of these things into a whole snowball that really isn't serving us either.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about this. In the book, you have something called wellness anchors. Is that true?
Yeah, so we talk about anchors a little bit throughout the book, but the idea is that think an anchor on a boat steadies the boat, right? It keeps us grounded. And so for each of us in our lives, what are the habits? What are those keystone habits that keep you grounded? There might be some days where you go above and beyond, and other days where you hit those keystone habits and that's what you got and that's what we did. But it's about recognizing what are those things that help you show up as a better version of yourself and figuring out how to do those on our most hectic, stressful day. And let those be sort of those anchors that keep us grounded. And then we can add on. Then we can say, all right, I have some extra time today. I want to use it in this way. Or I want to play with that biohack. Let's add it onto this and see, as the experiment, how do we feel? What's different?
So what would give us an example?
So the anchor might be first morning light. It might be 3 minutes in the morning where you pop outside and just take a couple deep breaths. That first morning light, the deep breaths do incredible things for your sleep, for your stress, right? Everything. Something that could essentially happen every day, no matter what. Okay, you're traveling, you can't get outside because it's hotel, pajamas, whatever. All right, let's look out the window, right? How can we figure out this little anchor of a habit? Maybe it's a quality breakfast, protein, fiber, quality fat. So even if you're traveling, especially over the holidays, even if you're out of your routine, that quality breakfast happens because it's one of our anchor habits. It's a keystone habit that you will ensure you bring with you wherever you go. So maybe it is not the same as what it is at home, but it happens. So maybe at home you're having eggs for breakfast, and traveling you're having the protein shake because you could pack the powder in a Ziploc in your suitcase. Or maybe it's vice versa. At home, you don't really have time, but traveling, you can go sit down at the restaurant where you are and enjoy a beautiful breakfast. But breakfast is that keystone habit, that anchor in your day where no matter what else happens, that happened.
I like that. Today, actually, I shared one of my anchors, which I didn't even think was an anchor, but it is to get the sunlight. I like my community, the girls in my community. I teach them, well, get outside if you can, a couple of times a day, 3 times a day, whatever you can, 15
Love
minutes.
that.
And then like it's a starting point, right? You don't have to go for an hour walk because that all or nothing mentality is going to kill them. So what I do is I have all my meals outdoors, if weather permitting, right? And if not, then go next to the window. Like there we go. But if I could take my meals outside, it takes me 10, 15 minutes to eat it. I've got that anchor and I'm getting my sunlight at the same time. And
Yep.
so I love this anchor actually that you're talking
The
about.
other thing I love about what you do is that by taking the meal outside, it forces presence with the meal, even if you're looking around, but it takes us away from our work. Like, how many times are we shoveling food in our mouths while we're doing 20 other things?
So actually today my husband and I were up on the terrace kind of looking at the people walking by and we see a new friend that we made walking by. And so here we are on the rooftop. Hey, how you doing? And so here we have our community piece, right?
I
This
love
is
that. Yes.
it was so lovely. It was like, great. Okay, we have our meal outdoors, got my vitamin D, got my communication, see a friend, hello, very short, but it hit all spots. And then it was like, boom, okay, now I go back to work. I didn't have to have this whole hour and spend time. Sometimes I think, oh, I'm not going to call that friend because I know I'm going to need an hour to chat with her.
Right.
Right.
Right. For sure. But I love what you're pointing out is like, it doesn't have to require so much time. And if we simply recognize the things that we experience as hitting those biostacks, it's even better because it just checks the box in our head and we go, we are doing it.
Yeah.
And we can keep moving forward.
There's another one. Actually, I want you to say another one too. I heard it
Okay.
yesterday or somewhere on some podcast, and he was saying when you're brushing your teeth, because this was about mobility. As we're aging, it was about fall prevention and staying stronger. So while you're brushing your teeth, was it the stork where you pick up one leg and then you put it on the inside of your thigh or your knee, wherever it is, and then you just brush your teeth for that whole 2 minutes because you hopefully have an electric toothbrush that's counting for you. And then that's it. Or you can do one leg for 1 minute, the other leg, and you switch. But I thought that was a great anchor as well. If you're trying to get more agility, I guess, and in terms of
balance.
balance in case you were going to fall, just a little practice there. So there's a balance.
Exactly. I love that. I'll have people do it while they're washing dishes because the added instability of the washing the dishes is a little bit of an extra challenge that you're working against to stay upright.
Good one.
And then another one of my favorites, again, on the mobility front and strength and all of those things. So I call it DWDS, drink water, do squats. So we're going to drink our water. Hopefully we're drinking more water. Inevitably, we're going to have to pee. Every time you go to the bathroom, hold on to the sink and do 7 to 10 squats.
Good idea.
A couple squats at a time throughout the day adds up. And you can hold on to the sink and not fall and notice how much stronger you get. And a couple at a time. You don't have to change your clothes. You're not going to get sweaty. It doesn't feel like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But we're building that strength. By the way, squats is getting up off the toilet when we're old. Like we want to be able to do that independently. Do squats.
Yes, that's so good. And if you like to travel and travel in some exotic countries, very often you will find a hole in the ground as your toilet. So you need to squat if you like to travel in some of these exotic
Yes.
places.
So true. Yes.
Yeah. So there's so many great things actually. I always have little tips from you whenever I talk to you, and these anchors
Yeah.
are a perfect one. So you've mentioned that you want to make wellness without the weirdness. What's the weirdest wellness trend that you've seen recently, and what's a more effective alternative that you'd recommend instead?
So a friend of mine sent this to me maybe yesterday or the day before, and it was a new thing on social media that was telling people to eat, I think it was 2 cups of beans every day,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
I'm
Cups of
like,
beans every day, and that's it? Or
I don't, unclear.
two
If you
cups
like
a
beans,
lot. Yeah. If
A, the quantity is a lot. B, going back to what we were talking about before, I know that quantity of beans does not agree with me in a variety of ways, not just on a gastro front, but on a blood sugar front. That would make me exhausted an hour later. I would have that blood sugar drop and no energy.
Yeah.
So if the theory behind it is more protein and fiber, I am all for it. And there are a variety of ways that you could do that. I don't love the idea of telling everybody to eat 2 cups of beans every single day.
Yeah. But it's an
The
experiment. You could try
right, you could try. Here's the
what
thing.
happens.
We also know that the body thrives on variety. So if we are going to not eat other things in order to get 2 cups of beans every single day, does that truly work for us in the long run?
Yeah. It's a good point. And it reminds me just yesterday, one of the girls in our community, we were talking about the next challenge. We do these challenges, 2-week challenges.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, when I did the protein challenge, the idea was to get the girls to add a little bit more protein to each of their meals.
Love it.
She likened it to almost a carnivore diet. And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't like, no, you're supposed to eat like everything. You were just supposed to add a little bit more protein. She goes, but I was eating, for her, it was a lot of protein that she didn't even have room for the vegetables or the carbs or fats. And I was like, okay, then that went a little too far because the idea was not to crowd out the fiber that's really good for us and that we want. But she did admit she felt really good. So I was like, okay, it's an experiment, but yeah.
And I think there's a piece of also recognizing short-term versus long-term. So she might enjoy a week or two at a time, a couple times a year, going more into that high protein, higher fat kind of approach. If we stay there and try to live in that forever, do we feel as good as we felt when we did it for a finite period of time?
Yes, we usually
And
would
so I
with
think
diets.
exactly. And so I think there's a piece of also recognizing, how do we define quote unquote working? How do we define wellness? How do we define healthy? And so I take the stance that it's a long-term piece, because if we're focusing only on that short term, we have shiny object syndrome. We're always chasing the thing for the next week and the next week. And that can then add to the stress, add to the confusion, and constantly following things, not really knowing what's working, what's not working, if we're looking for long-term outcomes.
On the protein question or topic, let me ask you, because this is something that comes up quite a bit in my community, is my community understands the mTOR pathway when you eat protein, right? mTOR meaning growth, right? And
Yes.
that's why we eat protein when we're trying to grow muscles, when we're trying to feed it. But yeah, they're concerned about the longevity aspect and the fact that if you follow Dr. Walter Longo's work, it's more, okay, you don't want to activate and grow tumors. And that puts you at more at risk. So they're a bit worried. Okay, well, I want the protein, I want the growth, but I don't want to grow that. How do you solve this problem?
So I think there's two pieces. One is the quality of the protein, and two is supporting our body's cellular health so that we're not feeding cells that need to be recycled or removed. So those are other biological pathways and things that happen. And so I think it comes down to hyper focusing on one thing at the expense of others, because we have to hit all of the pieces in order to see and experience long-term health, because the body is going to compensate. So the thing that I talk about all the time, and it's in the book too, the body is always doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So if it's not doing what we want it to do, or it's growing cells that are not quality cells, why does it think that's what it's supposed to do? What are we giving it that's feeding those cells? Odds are it's more other things than the quality protein that we're eating.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is maybe a bad example, but sugar feeds cancer cells. I have 3 friends off the top of my mind who, while in treatment, their practitioners said, I know it can be hard to eat. Whatever you feel like eating, just eat, even if it's a milkshake. Right. And one of my friends said, absolutely not. And I really hope you're not saying that to anybody else.
Wow. Good for her.
But again, it's, excuse me, thinking about why is the body doing this? If we want it to do something else, we have to give it the building blocks to do the other thing. We have to give it the antioxidants. We have to give it the nutrients. We might need some of that supplementation support to level up if we're trying to sort of put out a fire that's burning, right? So kind of an analogy, right? If you have a house fire and you pour a thimble of water on it, you're going to say water doesn't put out fires. But if we have a house fire and we get a fire hose and a fire hydrant with water puts out the fire. So if we already have something going on, we need a greater commitment. We need more tools to help put out that fire.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Yeah. What I learned from Dr. Stacy Sims, if you follow her, I think she's an exercise physiologist.
She and I are very aligned in our nutrition approach.
I know.
Yeah.
I might bring her up. Me too.
Yeah.
And that was one of the questions I had for her when I first met her on one of these. I think we had some kind of a Zoom meeting. And I was just finishing my studies with Dr. Walter Longo. So I was worried. We're all like gave up protein. We're all so scared.
What did she say?
So she explained in a very scientific way, which I couldn't remember, but the answer was if you exercise, it offsets the damage it offsets the mTOR pathway and the IGF-1. So IGF-1 is a growth factor, which Dr. Longo likes to have it lower and all that. So she says, and actually Rhonda Patrick explained it. If anybody wants to, I'll see if I can put her episode explaining all of it. Said the same thing. Exercise will offset that damage. So you don't need to worry. So perhaps, yeah. And again, I think it's so individual, how much protein and what kind of protein and all this for a 90-year-old sedentary woman is going to be very different than a 25-year-old athlete. So
Totally.
we have to keep some of these things in mind and know that there's nuance in all of this. And I've spoken to nutritionists who are cancer nutritionists like that. And that was one big question I asked. And they say, well, no, we see in our clinical experience, the ones who are getting more protein are actually thriving and having less recurrence. So again, yeah, it's all individual. Do what you want to do, but do your own homework. And I don't think we need to be as worried as I was, certainly when I was taking the course.
Yeah, there's so many things that protein does in the body that most of us, for the majority of us, we're using that protein in so many other places that there isn't that much left for these other things the way we can sort of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to it's sort of cleaning the terrain. Like it's not just protein. Like, come on, there's so many other things that could be contributing. Right. And we want to create a healthy environment, a healthy terrain so that whatever, if you have, even because evidently, according to Dr. William Lee, everyone has cancer cells in our body. It's just, we're going to keep them quiet or are they going to
feed them or, right.
Yeah. So we want to keep them down, keep this terrain. So I'm going to have to wrap up. I just would love to learn a little bit more about the book. If there's one action from your book that the listener can take away with, that would be a small win, what would that be?
So it's funny because as we're talking about this, I think it's going to be different for every single person who reads it, the one thing that they take away. And so I think that's the one thing that you only need to find one thing. And your one thing is probably different than the next person's. And that's the magic. That's where we start to come back to ourselves and trust our own bodies. That I think is so much of what's been lost as, as I say, the wellness world has gone off the rails. It's about coming back to ourselves and what we already know and trusting in ourselves and our bodies again.
So good. Exactly. You know what you need to do. Everything is within you and it's not complicated. So go check out the book, Uncomplicating Wellness. I'll have a link to that in the show notes, where to find it. Is it on Amazon as well?
It is. Yes.
Hey,
yes.
Great. So I'll
all the places.
Excellent. Excellent. So everybody go read this book and then come back to me and tell me what was your one takeaway, because I want to hear from everybody.
Me too. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Jenn, for coming on and sharing your pearls of wisdom. We always learn some new cool hack from you. And I hope to see you again. And thank you, everyone who's listened to the end of the show and is excited about the book. And I appreciate you spending your time with me. Thank you.
Thank you.